Welcome back to RadioPalaciomagazine.com. We're speaking with Josh Butler, Executive Director of Housing Long Beach. We were talking about protections for tenants, and I want to kind of move into an area that I feel like I'm now becoming an expert in, which I didn't even realize this program existed. And there's a lot of things in there dealing with both responsibilities of landlords and tenants. And I'm talking about the proactive rental housing inspection program, which has been around, right, for some shape or form for some years?
Yes, it was in the health department, and then last year, or maybe the year before that, but very recently it moved over into development services. And so it's become more of an arm of code enforcement.
And tell us what exactly that program is.
So that program is to check the basic standards of habitability on units here in buildings here in Long Beach. I think it's been given a little bit more juice in terms of the data that we're trying to collect from it. I think that previous years we haven't gotten good data, so it's been difficult for us to tell the efficiency or effectiveness of the program. They used to check if they checked a building, but we never knew how many units they got. And so that's something that we're keeping track of now, is how many actual units are they able to inspect, and what are the condition of those units. Many of our housing stock here in Long Beach is 50 years old, between 40 and 50 years old now. It's aging, and we see a lot of poor conditions. And this program is really designed to allow tenants to be able to call the city out and have an inspection done. So that's part of it, and that would be the reactive side, where a tenant calls in, they want something checked out. There's also a proactive side where the city sends out inspectors proactively into concentrated neighborhoods and attempts to let tenants know that they're out there to do inspections, and it's completely voluntary on the part of the tenant. There is no requirement on their participation, and the city is working with the Fair Housing Council of Orange County, who will go out in advance. They run the RFP to go out in advance and let tenants know that the inspectors will be coming around, so that there is a sort of a soft entry for the community who is not familiar with this program. So there's a little bit of an education that happens before the inspection takes place in the neighborhood.
So from what I'm reading of the ordinance, I mean, basically, landlord and tenants have to be given notice. I think it's 24, 48 hours notice. It might even be longer than that.
Yeah, it might be a little bit longer even.
Yeah, and then they basically, an inspector shows up, they gain entry to there's certain areas that they can, inspect and things like that. But the idea is, like you said, to be proactive.
Right, they want to go in, they want to make sure that smoke detectors are functioning, that their windows are not broken, that heat is working, that if there are habitability issues, visible mold is something that landlords would have to be responsible for cleaning up. So they want to make sure that there's some basic habitability standards being met. And so they're also, like you said, they do check exterior things in the building as well. But that interior, getting entry to the interior is very important, because that's where we see a lot of the habitability issues. Again, without just cause eviction protections, though, tenants, I think, are still likely to be wary of making their landlord upset. And a lot of times landlords will tell the tenants not to let the inspectors into the units. And so we see that power at play. The landlord holds the power over the tenant, and the tenant's not able to exercise even their minimal rights.
It seems, and this is a program, if I'm correct, that exists in other cities, right? In some shape, from LA, for instance.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems like a reasonable program. That seems like they are, there's information about this out there. The landlords seem to know about it more than the tenants know about it. So that's why I'm a little confused when I first started doing research on this for this interview. The recent campaign by landlords attacking the program, and the most recent issue of the Long Beach Business Journal, which seems to paint this picture of inspectors on the loose. I mean, that there's
Yeah.
people just barging into apartment buildings, demanding access to people's apartments, and really painting almost a human rights violation, unconstitutional intrusion. Explain to me what's going on.
Well, the opponents actually have used the term human rights violations and suggesting that the city is going to, barge through your doors, demand your identification, and search your unit. It's a reasonable program to reasonable people. It's a reasonable program to reasonable landlords. The program is designed, again, to ensure that tenants are living in safe and healthy conditions. If a landlord is providing safe and healthy conditions, then they shouldn't have any concern about the units being inspected. You mentioned that Los Angeles has this program. Indeed, they do. Their program requires the landlord to be on site and lets the tenants know in advance that they are going to enter the unit. It's not even optional. They want to make sure that those tenants have operational stoves, refrigerators, their windows are functioning, that the units are safe and habitable. We have a lot of landlords who don't want this program because they are not providing those safe conditions. They're not providing safe and healthy conditions, and they'd prefer not to have inspectors go in and find out. We've even saw a landlord come and testify that an inspector came to the apartment and they found a lot of problems, but that the landlord hadn't been inside the unit for 8 years. Well, I have to ask, is that a responsible landlord? They haven't been in the unit for 8 years. I mean, there are so many problems with that statement in and of itself in terms of what's supposed to be replaced within an 8-year period. Carpet, paint. So the idea of the program is to make sure that tenants are living in safe and healthy conditions. I think the problem that still is not addressed is the power relation between the landlord and the tenant, and that the landlord still holds the power. And we still have a lot of tenants who are fearful of allowing an inspection to take place because the landlord is the one who will retaliate against them. The city has no interest in going after tenants. They're out there inspecting and making sure the tenants are living in safe and healthy conditions.
Well, I did find one quote in the Long Beach Business Journal that was really interesting, and it was by a woman named Kathy Jurado, who claims that says that she's with the Latino Human Rights Coalition, and she says that the program is actually targeting minority communities. What does that mean? Or what do you think she means?
I would ask Ms. Jurado if slumlords are targeting minority communities, if slumlords are preying upon tenants with bad credit, who know that they're going to get over-leveraged with their rent, who hold basic repairs over their head because they haven't paid their rent, letting the tenants fall behind on rent, letting the tenants default, go into eviction, and end up with that on their record, and then putting someone else in the unit. So I really think the concern should be, these bad acting landlords, and not the city program, which is designed to make sure that residents are living in safe and healthy conditions, to fearmonger and suggest to people that they have concern about some sort of invaders coming into their apartment is the height of irresponsibility.
We're going to take one last break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about the rental escrow account program, and then talk a little bit more about tenants' rights and what we all, even those of us who are not renters, can do to deal with the issue of tenant protection. So when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Josh Butler, Executive Director of Housing Long Beach. This is Radio Palacio Magazine.com.